Last episode we reviewed the book The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and if you didn't watch that episode, go watch it right now. And yeah, it was about a guy who has to deal with the difficulties of being a teenager or being shy in general.
Today we asked ourselves the question if the book we read was really depicting the reality or if it was just a made-up story of the author.
Well, guys, what do you think? Does the book The Perks of Being a Wallflower represent real life situations?
So I definitely think the book represents real life situations because Charlie is often very shy, and that is how teenagers are today. Some teenagers are very shy, and that's why it's very relatable, yeah.
I can agree with Felix, but I think it depends on the definition of the question. If the book is 100% based on real life situations, I would have to say no, because I think there's some parts of the book I personally can't relate to. I think maybe some other people can relate to these parts, but I think especially these parts with alcohol, drugs, and that kind of stuff is not like depicted in the book, so it's not like this in my life. So I can't relate to these parts, so I don't think the book is 100% based on real life situations.
Yeah, I would also agree on the last part of your argument. I mean, it's really unrealistic that some teenagers or some students just get limitless amounts of pot and alcohol and everything, and no adult notices it, or no policeman comes to the party and looks for someone and just ignores that that Charlie is high when he finds him standing in the park. So I think it's really unrealistic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so at this point, I want to add that the story is written by the actor, and the actor has put his own
You mean
life
author?
story. What?
You mean author?
Yeah, the author. He put his own life like in the story in the book, and so it's we know that it is a real life story, but it's like it's a bit like helped out and put better, and so it's not 100% real, but we know it's definitely at some point it's real. Yeah.
I also heard that the author based the book on some personal experiences of his own, but I think the book just can't show all of the feelings of a person or all what's going on inside a person, especially when you have to deal with topics like suicide of your best friends or finding new friends in high school and stuff like that, and going to a psychiatrist and whatnot. And I think the book just can't really show the complexity of the person's feelings, and I think that's a problem, and that's why the book can't 100% show real life situations.
Right. I mean, the style of the author gives the reader a view of the mind of Charlie, but I also agree that a lot of parts, like when he's on drugs or when he's having a mental breakdown because of some disturbing situations, or just some bad luck in some situations, then there is something missing in this part. So it's just like he's confused, but there isn't more to that. It's just like he doesn't know what to say in this moment, but that's where it ends. There is nothing that comes from it, and in the next letter, in the most situations just ignored. It just happened, and there is no consequence for the actions Charlie does. But I mean, in a lot of situations, there is.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. But I want to say that there are so many details in this book. So, like for example, Charlie getting his driver license, and all these details make the book so much more realistic, and that's why I definitely stay at my point that the book is realistic.
Yeah, that's another thing I don't really get. how did a 15-year-old, or at least in the story he is depicted as a 15-year-old, get a driver license. I mean, in Germany you need to be at least, I think, 17 years old to really drive a car, and then you can only drive it with your parents or at least some supervisor. So I think that is another part that's a bit unrealistic for us, the reader, because we can't relate to that segment.
Yeah, but in America it's like 16, I think.
And I
To drive, yeah.
also think it has to do with something with like the time which like went on between the publishing of the book and now. I mean, it's over 20 years, so you can say that probably many things were different then than now, and maybe I don't know what the rules are in America nowadays, but I think maybe it was just 20 years ago that you could drive like already as a 15-year-old, and yeah.
But there are still a lot of rules set in stone since 200, 300 years ago. Like I believe it's a bit unrealistic to say, even if it's 20 years ago, that everyone is just okay with doing drugs, everyone is just having sex, and abortion is also a topic covered in this book that wasn't that noticeable 20 years ago, in my opinion. So I can't really understand how this book is depicting real life situations, at least from the back in the day.
As another example, maybe this Rocky Horror Picture Show is like something I don't believe would ever happen nowadays. Not in Germany, and I don't know about America, but I don't think in that like that kind, like teenagers in high school just running around the stage every week half naked and just playing. I don't think that would happen nowadays.
Yeah, okay, that's a bit unrealistic. But yeah, what you said about a bit ago, that the book is 20 years ago, so that's like a very good point, because then these whole things with the homophobic and Patrick and Brad's story, that's like more realistic when you think about it, that it was about 20 to 30 years ago when the book was released.
Yeah, I think so too, but I think that's just the way it is, and that's why I can't really accept that the book is 100% realistic. So I think it's partly realistic, of course.
Yeah, I think the Brad story has some legs as well. I mean, if you think about it, 20 years ago, it wasn't really usual that gay people just say they're gay, and Patrick just says after they met and went on the party that they're gay. He just gives Charlie this secret he gave pretty much nobody else than his stepsister. So I don't think that's realistic, but I have to admit the part where the father of Brad hits his own son as he finds out that he's gay is probably realistic for 20 years ago. But nowadays it's probably not completely uncommon, but it's not really realistic anymore.
Okay. So there definitely changed some rules, which were like normal these days and are just not believable nowadays. So yeah, I think maybe 20 years ago it was really realistic. Maybe so like 90 to 100% realistic, but I think it's less nowadays.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, what do you think about the connection between Charlie and Sam? Do you think that's realistic? Because personally, I think the book is realistic, but like the friendship, it's really weird, and for myself, not that realistic. So, what do you think about it?
Well, I think the ups and downs with Mary Elizabeth in the part and him kissing Sam during Truth or Dare are pretty realistic, so I can see that happening nowadays. But the part where Sam and he get intimate at the end of the story isn't really realistic at all.
I think it's it's again like this feeling of love, what is depicted between like Sam and Charlie, but not really. It's like also a feeling which can't be just shown in a few letters of Charlie, and just needs more and deeper discussion in the book. So I think the book just can show a realistic part of this love between Sam and Charlie. So I think it's just shown a little bit short. So if the author would have written longer about the relationship between Sam and Charlie, maybe it would be more realistic, but I think it's not really like how it would went nowadays.
But
Yeah,
I think the ups and downs were depicted really well. So you had these parts where they really loved each other and were so good with each other, and then later they hated each other, and so that went up and down the whole story. So I like that, but I don't think that's so realistic. So
Maybe it's also just some personal preferences of
yeah,
a
of course,
story.
everybody has other experiences, and of course not everybody from us is the shy person, the shy kind. So of course it's gonna happen in a lot of different ways.
But I think to sum up this discussion, I think you could say that 20 years or more ago, when the book was published, I think it was pretty realistic. You could say that there were some parts based even on the author's personal opinion, so there has to be some truth behind the story. But I think it's just a little bit outdated nowadays. But yeah, overall, pretty realistic book.
yeah,
I can agree with this conclusion.
yeah, same for me.
Well, guys, this is gonna wrap up this episode of the Big Book Review. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the channel. And a special thanks to our Patreon users over on Patreon, keeping this channel independent from fluctuating YouTube ad rates. If you want to support us like them, go in the description below. That's it from us, and if you want, you can watch this video right here about the next book review.